principal.
Welcome to the March 25th Board Study Session. All members are present except for Directors Crosby and Velasquez. We have no one for the public forum today. I have no forms. So I'm going to hand it off directly to Superintendent Dr. Thomas for the purpose and agenda of tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Chair France, Board Directors. Good to see everyone. And our purpose tonight is our work session purpose is to ensure that we have an opportunity to have more informal discussion and dialogue around key issues. So just tonight, we'll be spending a lot of our conversation around a budget and staffing update as our primary focus of discussion tonight. We also have several proclamations that we will read through this evening. And then we also have a brief strat plan update. And then I think we go into a business meeting, but that's it for our topics tonight.
Okay. So the first item on the agenda is the Oversight of Operations, Part A, Budget and Staffing Update, and I'm going to hand that off to Director Frederickson.
So, yeah, but can I just start off a little bit? Okay. So, just want to share that we've been sharing that the budgeting process is a year-long process. There's not like a month or for a certain window. It's a very iterative process. And I would also suggest that given the volatility of the legislature and MDE and a lot of other factors that contribute to budget issues, we are carefully watching, each month or each week where we are at and how things are tracking and trending. This is something that, if you all recall, as before I took on this role, having questions around our financial future and where things were going with enrollment projections, spending, etc. And here we are 2 years into my tenure having some really difficult conversations around where we're at with regards to our budget. And those of you who have been here longer than me know that this is a conversation that has been brewing for quite some time. And we know that we are looking at a variety of factors legislatively. We know we are looking systemically at enrollment numbers not coming into projections. Again, not solely unique to Prior Lake. We are seeing a drop in enrollment throughout many districts with an aging state of Minnesota. And we also know that the financial challenges that we're facing, some of which are a result of legislative issues, some of which are a result of operating levy issues, of a multitude of factors. But one thing that's also very clear is that, in the 7-county metro area, in the wake of the largest investment in education in decades, we are seeing the AMSD districts cutting well over $300 million collectively. So we've got a very deep state structural finance issue around how education is being supported or not supported. And again, those are conversations that we're a part of. Many of you have been a part of this through MSBA as well. And we are also just watching the overarching market. So whether it's the volatility of will the government shut down or stay open conversations that we are ebbing and flowing through, or what we're also seeing around inflationary costs just skyrocketing, and we're trying to manage to that, there are a variety of components that we have to continually watch and monitor that allow us to develop the best budget. And I know that we have been talking about the difference with many of our staffs, the difference between a structurally balanced budget and a balanced budget. And what we're finding is that just many of our staff, and I'll say many of our average community citizens, don't understand all the nuances of what goes into making a budget and what all these terms mean. So we're really trying to make sure that we're taking every opportunity to help inform not only our board, our community, but our own staff of kind of where our current reality is and how and why we are here and why we're asking for certain things and making certain decisions. Because trust me, as many of you stated a month or so ago when we're looking at the budget reduction of upwards of $5 million, none of these cuts were cuts that we are all, parading over. This is not easy decisions to come to. And I will also say that as we continue to look at the market and the costs and what are the unintended consequences or costs associated with even reducing certain things, are we going to truly be able to make all the reductions that we are projecting that we need to make without causing an implosion, if you will, with the district and lose a lot of structure that really is keeping our district vibrant right now. So it's a razor's edge on many times, and that's something that we want to just provide continued updates with you all on tonight as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Tammy and Emily, who will go through some of our budgeting as well as some of our enrollment conversations to start.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Start with the enrollment projection, which is one of the documents that you have in your packet. We give you the monthly enrollment report every month, so we know right where we are, we're standing. Right now, as of beginning of March, we were at 8,609 students currently enrolled in K-12. For our 24-25 projection, we're just under 8,700 kids. We had 8,682. And as of March 15th, we currently have enrolled 8,463 students. So we're 219 students below what our projection was, which means that's about $1.5 million, $1.6 million revenue that if this projection stands, our projection would be $1.6 million over what we would anticipate if we don't get those kids. We know we enroll kids now through September, and if we look at where we were at this point last year, our 23-24 projection on March 17th was 8,414 kids, which was 195 fewer than we currently have. So if, in fact, that same trend continues, then we should be right at what our target was come September. So, but again, we're going to continue to watch it. We'll keep you updated. If we need to make adjustments for the final budget in June, we will. And then we'll continue to watch it over the summer just to make sure. So that's where we're standing on our enrollment.
So for the class size report that you have in front of you, we gave you the average for the previous 2 years and current year using October snapshot dates as a consistent measure, and then projections of where we are projecting to be at for next year. So you can see by grade level where the averages we are projecting are falling. And this is including the reductions that we proposed in each of those sections. So the K through 5 section averages do include the 13 section cut. The 6 through 8 projections do include the 1.6 FTE reduction. And then the 9 through 12 section averages, those are with no FTE reductions. And you can see where those fall in comparison to this year and the previous 2 years in your packet.
Director Herman, can you share what the 13 section cut is?
So when we were looking at the enrollment and where enrollment was falling, and we look at each of the grade levels and where our current sections or our numbers are at, there were multiple sections throughout the system that were well below our target, where even reducing them a section kept them still within the target because of the lower enrollments that we were seeing. So for an example, we cut 3 different kindergarten sections, and you can see even with the 3 kindergarten section cuts, we're still at a 19.08 average in our kindergarten sections, whereas in the previous years, we're at 21 to 23.45, or sorry, 0.49. So that's what I'm referring to when speaking to those 13 sections. When we brought forward the proposed reductions in the class right sizing, it was looking at those projections of where enrollments are, where section reductions could occur and still stay within that target and discussion cap. Those are the class size right sizing that we propose on that one slide that equated to about 1.8 million in reduction.
Can you define section?
Yeah, sorry. In each, like, let's just take elementary, for example, because it's easier to speak to than the secondary, different core classes. Each kindergarten at each building has a section. So if, like, Hamilton Ridge has 4 kindergarten sections, and then we're proposing that it's either going down to 3 sections or it's going up to 5 sections.
So is a section equal?
classroom.
A class. Thank you.
That was the easiest way to say that, sorry.
And if I may, Director Herman, along the same lines of clarifying language, which I think is really important. We initially started having conversation, again, a lot of internal conversation, and we would talk about right sizing. And I want to just be very clear, because right is relative, and people will say, well, my class has this and my class has that. So we spent, several weeks going around to many of our schools at staff meetings, and I'm just mindful and sensitive to how that lands for many of our staff. And I think it's really important for, our board and our community to understand our adjustment of classrooms or sections is premised on our enrollment decline. And so we're adjusting for our classroom sizes based upon the under-enrollment that we currently are experiencing. And so that's an important distinction that I think was not made as explicitly as we could have. So I just want to make sure that we clarify that, because that was some good feedback that we received around that particular language. And then also, I think it's important, Director Herman, and you could probably explain this a little bit better too. Our kids don't come to us in like nice, neat little packages. They come to us, obviously, physically in a nice package, but varying needs of students will get additional resources, so it's not a true like 1.0 enrollment. It might be a 1.2 because we have to also take into account elective or prep support that comes by way of our elementary electives of FIED, music, etc. Or I might also get additional support from special education, so I get an additional revenue added on to me. So I might actually cost the district, maybe a 1.4. But when we make reductions, we're not cutting 0.4 of a kid, right? Or they come to us as wholes. So we have to make some decisions sometimes as to if we reduce another classroom, that could easily skew us way up and get our class sizes way high. If it's just a couple of kids that we need to move, and because we have to move enough that we, move a section, then we have to just maintain maybe a slightly lower section, because any onesie twosies would push it up to, ratios that are just insurmountable. So that's math on paper versus what happens in the field are sometimes slightly different. So I just want to make sure that the board and our community understands that.
Can I also add to that the elementary schools and the demographics and the populations within each of those are also different, so what may affect one doesn't affect another. So that we're not just dealing with you know, an experience at a Red Tail Ridge versus a Hamilton
Right,
versus a
right.
Westwood.
The needs of our students and families obviously vary by school. And so those factors are taken into account on the kind of behind the scenes budgeting sheet. But we also know that those needs of our students that come to us, whether they're at Red Tail or Hamilton or, you know, Five Hawks, it doesn't matter. We're gonna serve and support all the needs of our students. And we just know that some schools will receive additional funding because they may have a higher concentration of needs. Is that what you're kind of getting towards?
What I was getting at is when you are adjusting those sections or whatever, it's not like you're telling kids to go across boundaries.
Oh, correct,
And
correct.
so there, you have additional limitations with regards
Correct.
to the.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if we only have, like, for example, certain site-based programs within special ed at this school, we need to keep that student there, and so that kind of holds an enrollment slot, if you will. So we have to protect that, because we can't move into a school that doesn't have the same support. Yeah. So a lot of factors go into how we balance our enrollment, and to ensure that class sizes are effectively managed and supported so that staff have good ratios to make connections with our students, and students receive the support that they get, as well as the financial exercise, you know, that we have to do to ensure that now how does this translate into dollars and cents that we have at our disposal.
Can I ask a question? Are those average projection class sizes based upon that 8463? The like peach column on enrollment projection? I screened with it.
These
Yeah.
enrollment projections are based off of
Or the
the
8663?
same enrollment projections that the business office has.
So the 8463, the column.
Yep,
The peach column.
with some, we also consider, we meet with the principals and we talk about how many do you think you're gonna anticipate coming, and they have a list of those students, and so we take that into account as we say, okay, now we need to hold 4 slots here because we anticipate whatever,
But it's based on that reduced 200 students.
Correct.
yes.
For our starting.
Yes.
Yep, for our
and then
start.
And then we do look.
Make
we've
adjustments.
already looked at which are our concern
Oh,
sections,
okay, yeah.
grade levels at a particular building, and engaged with all 7 of our principals around that, to make some decisions for now, here in March, recognizing there might be some decisions that need to, as things flow over the course of the coming months, leading up to the start of school, there might be a shift that needs to occur. And so principals, the more tight we get with our class size, the more challenging those shifts become, and so we're trying to be forecasting for that. The other piece I would add to, specific to the secondary numbers, is that we did leave off the elective courses in that document because of the variation of course selection. However, I would say that we also went through the exercise with our principals to do the staffing at the secondary level. And I would say that the sectioning in the elective areas is similar to and aligned with the sectioning that you see here related to the core courses.
And the other thing that we should also mention is the last couple of years, we have set aside dollars in a designated fund balance because we know we're not going to nail this 100%, right? Because again, it changes throughout the next 6-7 months. So we do have dollars set aside so that we can quickly make some decisions. If we need to add a section back, we will have the resources set aside to do that immediately so we can post it and get it filled quickly.
Because some of the analytics that we look at is trends throughout the year at different schools, at different grade levels. Because you can really see the differences, to Chair Fran's point, between some of our elementary schools and when they see their enrollment coming in compared to others. Or kindergarten, when enrollment comes in, is significantly different than 5th grade, for example. Our 3 through 5 grade is pretty consistent. We don't see a lot of fluctuation through that, but our K through 2, we watch very closely. So that assigned fund balance really gives us that flexibility to quickly act as this happens versus having to wait through a different structure to get those sections added back in.
So kind of feeding off of Director Burnett's question, so given the fact that there's like 100 students difference between the 24-25 projection of 579 in kindergarten versus where it's at currently, so you're basically saying, depending upon where those kids enroll, that type of thing, you then would make an adjustment.
Correct. Because there's some schools that can still handle quite a bit of enrollment in kindergarten coming into the system. Space-wise. And there's sections where there's others that are already getting close to our target. So depending on where the students enroll and where they come in, is where we may need to make different decisions.
And if I may also add to that response too, because so the science is the mathematical exercise, but the art is 2 kids come to us and we have an opening in 3rd grade, but not in kindergarten. But do we want to split up the family, right? Those are the art conversations that we have to have at the local level to say, okay, yeah, we've got a little wiggle room. We'll go up in kindergarten because we're not at our cap, so to speak, but we're definitely going above the target. So we'll have to watch that. And those are some of those nuanced conversations that we want to make sure that we're supporting families as much as we possibly can around choice and where they live, et cetera, or the needs, to Chair Francis' point too, that I might have to go to this school, and as a sibling, we're going to take both of you because we're not going to split the kids up. So we go over a little bit in a grade level because we need to get the site-based program supports for that other student, the other sibling.
And these are all within our targets?
These are within or below targets,
Okay.
on averages,
Right.
yep, and not touching our caps.
There are a couple sections we're watching closely,
Mhm.
and we'll continue to watch as enrollments continue.
I think I may have asked this at a previous meeting, I can't remember. Are the 219 shy that we are, is that typical being about that low typical for where we are in the year?
Yeah, last year at the same time, we were about 194 short, and we made up that. So
Thank you.
we'll continue to watch it very closely.
A couple of questions. So at first glance, obviously, you kind of answered this. I'm sorry if it was Emily or Tammy. You said, you see a lot of fluctuation in K through 2 versus 3 through 5, typically on average. But I look at this and I look at the biggest number of cuts is in the elementary levels. So can you just explain what that dance looks like in terms of the process of that? You just look at first glance, you say, whoa, elementary's getting the biggest cut, and the middle school somewhat, and then the high school seemingly, right? And I put that in quote fingers, untouched. So can you talk to that process? And then part B of that question is, have we identified, when we're looking at K through 5, have we yet identified, or knowing things, there's a lot of things, it's that dance that we're doing for the next couple of months. Have we identified the buildings that are going to be affected by this, or can we say that with certainty yet because we can't? I'm not being very eloquent, I don't think, but I hope you can get my gist.
So when you look at the sections cut, you have to also keep in mind what the average class size is now in that last column. So if you look at kindergarten, our targeted class size in kindergarten is 21. So we're at 19. So we were able to reduce sections in kindergarten because we were still below the target. If you look at the enrollment projections on that other sheet, you can kind of see that as the grades progress, the first graders become second graders, the second graders become third graders. It's pretty consistent of how many we're projecting in the next year, because you just kind of do a grade progression. Kindergarten is hard to do that with because you don't have anything to kind of feed it forward.
Sure.
So kindergarten is always the biggest challenge for us, which is why I think we see the biggest variances. Some years we have, this past year, we actually had to add kindergarten sections because we had so many kids.
Right.
This year, we were surprised. We're not seeing the number of kindergarten enrollments that we would have expected, given what we were looking like this year. So we just, it's, again, as Dr. Thomas says, it's the numbers are one thing, but to try to make them all fit where it makes sense. We also, because we're also looking at where do we, if we get more kindergartners or first or second grade, where do we think they're going to enroll? And then we have to leave enough space in those schools for that to happen.
And that's kind of what you were talking about, Dr. Thomas, like keeping families together where possible and just kind of
Or
planning for the
we have an
unknown.
influx of enrollment because some house sales came through, and so one school might get disproportionately higher summer enrollment than another, and if they don't have any more room, what's that conversation with the family? I bought a house so I could go to this school, and I live in this, so then we need to look at then where's our target, where's our discussion cap? And that's a conversation that, you know, we have with administration, with staff to say, because sometimes they'll go up one. You know, again, not a perfect science here, but those are those nuances that we have to have conversations about on a family-by-family basis.
And I know you, sorry.
No, I was saying, and generally, you don't fill a building, you know, ideally, you know, an enrollment would be at 85%. If you were if you were a growing district, you hold 85% for influx. You know, families get transferred, you know, job, we move in now midsummer. They now come in late for enrollment. Well, now we have room in our schools. But some of our schools don't have the same physical space, so we have to kind of guesstimate where do we think we might get the influx on some historical trends. Some of our principals know I always get 10 families, almost, you know, for the past 5 years, come August. They always come first week of August, and so we kind of hold that as a placeholder.
And I know you said that, like, electives aren't listed here, obviously, right? So that's why I put high school in kind of quotey fingers, because obviously there's so many things that aren't listed here. Like, I don't see, or maybe they're built into the grades. So like, Bridges and Lake are online?
Yeah,
Are those?
that would be separate. That would not be included in this. So this was, the high school portion here is Prior Lake High School specifically.
So do we have Lake online? I mean, those are.
Yeah, we do. Yep. But those capacities are not factored in here.
Okay,
And,
why?
and by design, those capacities are different. You brought up Bridges by design, layout of the building, classroom size, needs of the students. They are smaller class sizes, so that would impact the class size averages you would see here, not be as true to what they actually are if we factor those sections into this.
I understand that.
The other piece I would say, specific to, you raised a question earlier about the number of reductions that we had at the elementary as compared to the secondary level. I would just call your attention to the trend data that is presented here over the years, where we felt we had albeit limited, we had some room at the middle school level to once again remain within our targets to do a slight reduction. Whereas at the high school level, if you look at this current year, we had a number of them that were outside of our target range. and therefore we didn't feel we had the capacity to reduce. And so the numbers you see presented for next year are in each of those areas within our target range.
I have a question. So would it be fair to say that the class sizes would be similar to the we saw in 22, 23? When I look at the averages, the numbers appear to me to be the same. And my question is that how many sections did we have in 22, 23 compared to the projections that we're going to have in 24, 25 when you look at sections? Because the numbers appear to be about the same, like the average kindergarten is, well, actually our projection's lower, but first grade's similar, second grade, and on and on. So what I'm trying to understand is how many actual sections did we have in 22, 23 versus how many are we actually going to have in 24, 25? Sense?
Yeah, we would have
Do you
that.
have that?
I can try to look it up quickly. I wasn't prepared for that question.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I'm just
No
looking
worries.
at that and, because like, I agree with what you're saying, Jess. When you say you're cutting 13 in elementary, that number is scary, right? I get it's based on enrollment. But is that just, that doesn't include like specialist classes, like we're not eliminating any like
No.
music or art or?
Not a change to the
Any-
schedule in any way. No.
So all the programming will be the same?
Correct.
So maybe
So
help.
to answer that
help-
question,
yeah,
the
yeah.
scheduling and the programming and our class targets and discussion caps all remain the same. The reduction in sections come from a direct correlation to the reduction in enrollment. But in terms of the 2 PE, 1 music, 1 art, 1 media, that whole concept all remains the same.
So that doesn't impact any of those special classes?
It impacts it in terms of whenever there's a section reduction, there's impacts to the specialist schedule. It's not a direct 1-for-1 all the time, but when we budget, we average out a 0.2% FTE in specialist is the same thing as a 1.0 classroom
Per
reduction. So when we're reducing 13 sections, we budget and estimate that it'll be a 2.6% reduction in the specialist schedule. It didn't equate to that, and that's all because we are already on the most lean, complicated version of specialist scheduling that we possibly can be on.
I recall that.
So any time that we change a section, it impacts the specialist scheduling puzzle. And so we can estimate what that reduction could potentially be, but until we actually know exactly where the sections are in which buildings and try to figure out that plan, we don't know the true reduction that we can realize. When we drew the line in the sand for this round to figure out where sections will be at, what we can reduce, the reduction to the specialist was a 2.0 FTE. It did not get to the 2.6 reduction.
Of that 13.
In relation to the 13 classrooms
So of
being
13, 2 is going to be specialists?
No,
What you're saying?
in addition to. So we reduced 13 classrooms, and we also reduced 2 FTE and specialists.
And that's not reflected on here?
That's not in class sizes, because those class sizes are the classroom class sizes, that's not in relation to the specialist schedule.
I have one more question regarding, it was shared that 21 is the target for kindergarten, target class size, is that correct?
For kindergarten?
Yeah, is that correct?
I think that.
So I'm just wondering if, if we could have, what the target size classroom, what our district target size classroom is per grade, is that a possibility to get that?
We had that
Yeah,
in the
we
previous-
actually had that,
If that was in
Pull
the
that.
previous discussion, I think we just pulled that slide forward.
Yeah,
I agree with Director Blaine. If you could add it to this slide, I think for future conversation, it'd be
Sure.
helpful. So that we can, I mean, I understand you, Dr. Thomas, you did say we are within that range,
yeah,
but I think having it there so that we
Sure.
can see it on paper would be
another
helpful.
column there,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sorry, what are you asking for?
What the target and discussion cap
For each grade
for
level.
each grade level.
So if you recall on
I
the
mean, yeah, we
proposed
have
budget
this, right?
reduction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, we've got it
That-
here.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for.
I think the ask is for it to be in the
That
same.
wasn't.
Sure, got it.
That was from a
That
previous,
was from our last
previous
session.
presentation.
I didn't bring mine, Jeff.
So Director Atkinson, to answer your question, off of a brief look, and I can confirm this data and get back to the board.
Yeah,
In 2022-23, we had 155 sections
we had 155 sections, okay? And
at the
so,
elementary level.
correct, and then what are we projecting it to be, well, yeah, in the projections?
next year.
The next year, 24, 25 projections. Thank you for finding that. Press.
148.
So that's not a reduction of 13. Is that correct, the way I'm reading that, or not?
You asked for 22-23, correct?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm trying to see, like, do the numbers correlate that 155 minus 13 would be?
So she's looking
Are
at
you-
current year
you
to
wanna
next
compare it
year,
to
not
23,
2 years
24?
What's that?
before.
Compared to 23-24, not 22-23.
Oh, okay.
You asked for a year, 2 years, 2 years prior.
Right, so what's 23, 24?
So the current, this year's number of sections in the elementary level,
Mhm. Yeah, I suppose it's fair to know that too as well.
$161.
161.
Yeah, just so, Director Herman, you know that up until a couple years ago, we used to get the elementary school grade level number of sections at each elementary school. I can send that back in case that helps and then we have the class target size and the actual average size of the section. Per elementary school, it came in a huge spreadsheet grid. I still have that, I fill it in myself now. I'll just send that to you in case that helps other board members too. And
If you could send it to the full board, that'd be great, thank you.
I'll send it to Director Herman and she can decide whether she wants to fill in the numbers.
Any other question on class size or enrollment?
The only question that I have is at the middle school for these core classes. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for including the core classes instead of just the general class size over the budget discussion numbers that we had, because this helps understand where our priorities are also with the class sizes. And my only concern is the standard deviation on the average. Simply because obviously if you have an average 50% or greater, 50% or less, and coming through the middle school, last year, I noticed that some of the class sizes were significantly higher. And so I don't want to lose that, because in some of these core classes, that's pretty important. That's a lot of weight on teachers to grade papers. I mean, each additional kid adds a lot. So while I understand the reporting need to have the average, when you are looking at, an average of 37 kids or something like that, and you think 50% are higher and 50% are lower, it's already really high, and that is something that I think needs to be understood as we talk about budget constraints and considerations, and where we really would like this to be from not only the educator's perspective, but also from the aspect of differentiating the classroom.
Yeah, and I appreciate you acknowledging that when there's that average, there is that variation. And we continue, and you brought up the middle school specifically, but this would apply at the high school as well, that our schedulers continue to work diligently. A group that will be formally recognized tonight. The assistant principals are generally charged with that task of doing everything that they can to create that balance, and then obviously counselors supporting that work as well to maintain the greatest balance possible. But there are unique circumstances that create what we call in that realm of unfriendly class sizes for a particular period due to the scheduled variations that exist at the secondary level, resulting in some rate variation, which is a concern, certainly, and especially a concern when we continue when we have our class size averages starting where they start. That variation becomes a concern. So fully recognize that, and the larger that class size average starting point is, the greater chance that that variation gets to those numbers that you speak of where there are sections on occasion of 36, 37. Which
Are we now required to report class size to MDE on a monthly basis, or, and if possible, is it something that we could also have that same report given back to the board so that we have an understanding of those type of, like you said, their averages? So if your report,
I think it's a yearly report.
oh, is it yearly? Okay, I wasn't
Yes.
sure what the reporting requirements
and
are.
to
So
my knowledge, I don't know if we've seen what that report is yet.
No, it's a new statute.
It's a new statute of requirement, and we have not yet seen
It doesn't begin until December.
Okay.
So I'm hoping we'll get more direction from MDE on what that report will look like.
Okay.
But it makes sense to
share it.
share that with the
Yep,
board.
for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that'd be great.
The MDE historical numbers, though, they're still good, right? I mean, you go into the MDE, you go into this data and statistics page, and it gives you those are still,
Yeah,
those
that's
are what we used to
archived there.
report,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And they go back to, what, 2015 now, I think, with the amount of data they have in there?
And in the reporting, they generally are not even as specific as we have gotten here. So that's what will be interesting to see with the new requirement, if they get this specific or even more specific
At the middle school and high school, they're not, but at the
at the elementary.
elementary
yes.
school, they are very specific, yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I'm just sorry, one more thing to add to that. It's my understanding, and just quickly refreshing myself on that piece of legislation, Director Atkinson, I think it is going to be a year lag report.
Oh, it is, okay.
So they'll be asking for data in December for the previous year.
Oh, interesting, okay.
So
it
it
really
talks
is
about
not
it's being
relevant.
effective the 23-24 school year, and they're not asking for it until December 24.
So it's not really relevant to,
It would be,
From
it would be a
planning
historical.
purposes.
it's a historical data, yes. Okay, thank you.
I do have one more question, sorry. When we look at elementary specialists, does this potentially increase their travel between buildings, or does this help decrease?
So as we look through that master specialist schedule, we will still continue to look at it with the priorities that have been identified with the work group to keep consistent adults to the extent possible, reduce the amount of travel to the extent possible, and utilize any flexibilities that we have available to us depending on asking specialists if they would prefer to fill some roles of a daily building sub versus traveling, prioritizing having music specialists per building to be that one point of contact for all the concerts that they propose. So all of that will continue to be a part of that puzzle as we look through and try to figure out the next steps in the staffing process to do that to the extent possible. But I do want to reiterate that we are on the leanest possible specialist scheduling that we're aware of. I can't imagine anything more lean than what we do around that. So we'll do the best that we can within that resource.
And I have to share, and this is, we were just having this conversation earlier this evening. It's not something, I mean, you could look at this leanness in two different ways. So from a stewardship standpoint, one could say, well, that's great. You know, we run a very lean schedule on specialists. We run an extremely lean secondary schedule. We run an extremely lean administrative overhead cost. So that makes sense from a stewardship standpoint. From a daily impact and from an outcome standpoint, you get what you pay for. So I just want to be clear that we need to balance being stewards, and we also need to ensure that we're able to get the outcomes that our students deserve. And so the secondary schedule, I'll tell you right now, and Dan and I have had this conversation, it's the cheapest that we can afford. It's the most expensive.
That exists.
It's the cheapest that exists. And I could probably turn to any of our, I thought we had some secondary students in here tonight, but, we could ask our high school students, who used to have a different schedule at the high school, what would they prefer? And I can tell you right now that our students would prefer a different schedule that would allow for that more personal, individualized, and academic pathway support. We are forcing kids to choose between what they love and what is required. And again, you're not going to get everything. We're not trying to do that, but those are some things that I think we have shared for many years in this community. And I just want us to be mindful of that reality, that that might not be the ideal if we are looking for differing outcomes for, students.
Well, we do operate, we've been talking about it, the auditor tells us we operate $2,000 plus, actually it grows each year, spend less than some of our neighboring districts, actually.
Right.
And as a result, it shows up. So we need to.
And I appreciate our staff who are busting their chops to do great things for our students. Be very public about that. And I also ask rhetorically, now what could they do if they had different resources available to them for supporting kids? That's a fundamental question. Because that's the difference between good to great, as Jim Collins would state. So just a placeholder that's fresh on our memories, or on our minds from a conversation earlier this evening.
Well, I think it's relationships. I mean, it's not just, it's relationships with these kiddos that need a hug in the middle of the day, or, it's from the media specialist or a classroom teacher they had 3 years ago, or, or 5 years ago, or at any age. There's seniors in high school that go and visit their kindergarten teacher.
Right.
I mean, it's that relationship is so important, and I get it. I understand what you're saying about it's the most heartbreaking balancing act ever, to be good stewards of our budget and be responsible with the money we have, and at the same time, helping build those relationships with our kids.
I agree with Director Olsted, and I know we have talked about this in the past, and now that we're talking about the high school and scheduling and talking about relationships, in our core classes, the kids do not have the same teachers throughout the whole year. And is that something that, could be looked at from it doesn't cost any money, I don't think, to have the same English teacher for the whole entire year, versus my son has one teacher first quarter, second quarter, and then has a whole different teacher third and fourth quarter. And so doesn't allow the teacher to really understand which students have the 504s and the IEPs. I know they do the best that they can, digging into that, obviously, and paying attention to that, but really getting to know those kids and helping to support them. Is that something that we are looking at?
Well, we have given some priority to that at the 9th grade level. There are exceptions to that, but we have given some priority to that at the 9th grade level. There are exceptions from a scheduling standpoint based upon the course sequencing that certain students have that make that not able to be accomplished throughout the year. But as they go through our system, that is also something that we have given consideration to at the 10th grade level, but due to that variation growing as they move through the system, and certainly not, I don't want to say it's not possible, but generally in 11th and 12th grade, there are very few courses that are consistent for our students. English would be an exception to that. But once you go beyond that, the variation goes quite significant. So that is something that certainly they have had put forth efforts to improve at the 9th grade level through our BAR, focus on the BAR program. That has been an effort that has gotten better than it was, but it's not perfect by any means.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen, I had a student graduate in 2020, 22, sorry, and then I have a freshman as well in the high school, and I haven't seen any change. So that's, you know, why I'm bringing it up, because I think it's something, a small thing that we could potentially do that could have a big impact on our students in core classes, is having that same consistent teacher throughout the year.
But we do have the cheapest scheduling, and that causes a resource issue, right? I mean, if we,
That shouldn't have anything to do with it.
actually it does.
There's multiple factors. So based upon the course sequence, the course itself, if it's a year long, or if it's a half, semester
Quarter-based
course.
or semester-based,
And then yes, scheduling wise, if you're trying to balance the desires of a student for what they want to take, balanced against the core, there may be trade-offs. So if that elective, let's just say band, is only at 3rd hour, and that teacher's section of English is full, you'd have to go to this section to get it in 4th hour, because that teacher only has it open in 3rd hour. So yes, it's a balance between scheduling and sequencing of courses too, and how long they actually are. A multitude of factors. There's no one thing that dictates it, but.
And I appreciate that being brought up actually, just at conferences this past quarter. It was brought up to me, scheduling relationship-wise by a teacher, not even by myself, just by a teacher. And so I am curious, is it difficult? I could only imagine at the high school level how difficult that scheduling challenge might be. I am sure that there is some sort of process in place. But when we do talk about relationships, we know how important that they are, regardless of age. I mean, I think that, relationships are important throughout our lives, and I am curious about, what that might look like to have more focus on trying to do that, if it's even a possibility, if it's a staffing / scheduling nightmare. Again, I'm assuming that there is a process, but you're bringing it up, it was brought up to me by a teacher, so.
And also building that relationship from a parent standpoint with that teacher.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think if you have had a student in our high school, you have had that experience. We're not alone in this. Perhaps, I think it's the current principal at a middle school now that has a lot of information about that scheduling process. And if you talk to that individual.
Yeah, and he has worked with the individual who's doing it now.
Yeah, I mean, what is interesting is that we all have this basis of like, if it were in the business world, we would buy some sort of technology and it would just fix that problem. And we just have to use reality behind that. We don't have those resources. If I'm at Best Buy or 3M and I have let's just get that software. I don't think it's a software. It's from my understanding, it's a pretty interesting puzzle.
Yeah, I think it is, but it's not something other districts are, they're not.
know for sure.
I'm not going to give
Let's
specifics.
just sit on that.
Well, yeah, I'm not an expert in scheduling, but I know it's something that's been brought up in our district, and we've all had personal experience with it. So
I think what we could do is kind of talk about the scheduling issue, but also the cost of rearranging and managing Infinite Campus. And we are on the cheapest schedule. We did cut that down in 2012. I remember that. And that took out a lot of options and made, by the way, COVID kind of a nightmare because we couldn't change Infinite Campus. Are we okay with the questions on the budget and the enrollment and the.
Thank you for the paperwork.
So I do want to talk about the budget sheet that I gave you. I was trying to find a way that we can kind of show kind of how our dollars come in. It's not just one big pot of money. There's very specific purposes for each of the dollars that we get in. So this first section is the discretionary dollars in the general fund. And then I've put on here what these are projected expenses for 24-25 in schools and departments, and then a total. And then the projected revenue that we're going to get based on those categories. Some of those, like utilities, the state doesn't give us state aid for utilities. It's part of the formula allowance dollars. But if we're going to spend $2.4 million on utilities, then we need that revenue portion of the formula allowance to be dedicated towards utilities. So that's what I was trying to show on this spreadsheet. You can see the discretionary dollars, and then we have the categorical dollars. The yellow highlighted ones under the categorical are items that actually are going to eventually, some if not all of those dollars will get moved to the schools as the year goes on. So like professional development. Dan's office oversees the professional development department, but they will allocate dollars to the schools once they determine what professional development is and how much the school needs. And the same thing with capital dollars. As schools need things fixed in their schools, those capital dollars will get moved to schools. But they're initially allocated to those specific departments. And then the third section is grants and other funding. And those are very specific purposes that where you can spend those dollars with. And then the total, you see we have 122 million projected expenses with 117 million in revenue, and that's where we had to identify just under 5 million in cuts. I've listed those 5 million that we have shown you a month ago, one of the board meetings. Again, these are discussion points. We haven't finalized the budget yet. You'll see several more iterations of this before you have to approve it in June. And then I just wanted to make sure that we were aware of some of the risk that we have. So when we build a budget, we make some assumptions, and we've talked about those assumptions, what we've built into the budget for some of the contract increases, for all of those salary schedules, and we've talked about all of what we have built into these assumptions. But there also are some risks that we need to just be aware of. And one of those risks is that, like you said, we're currently short of our projection for enrollment. If we in fact do not get 219 kids, it's going to have an effect on our projected enrollment. We have 45 students right now that are projected to need occupational therapy services and special education, 82 that are going to need speech services, 26 new center-based, and we have 58 students in evaluation. We did not budget for those students in our original budget, so that's going to be an issue as we move forward. How are we going to provide the services for the needs of the students on IEPs? And we're projecting that it's about $1 million that we're going to need to address these needs. Any increases that come from collective bargaining agreements that we have not already included in the budget, if vendor contracts are increased over what we budgeted, and again, we showed you what we were projecting for those increases. We still have this curriculum for the READ Act kind of hanging over our head. We are hopeful that the state's going to approve our curriculum, but if they don't, we will have to invest in a new curriculum. Then there's also cost for training to implement the READ Act. Again, those are still ongoing conversations. And then we also talked about one of the reductions was Schoology. If we do in fact move to the Google Suite, there is some training costs for new software. So all of those are risks that we're gonna have to look at, trying to mitigate as we move forward with this budget. But I wanted to at least show you, kind of as you look at this, what our challenges are. And then one of the other things, the other sheet that I gave you actually came from the Minnesota School MSBA, School Board Association.
Minnesota School Boards Association.
And on the back page, it kind of gives you an idea of what our biggest challenge is as we move forward with this budget. The state has said, and legislature has given a record amount of money to schools this year. And while we certainly appreciate it, you can see from this chart, the majority of the money, like over half of the money that we're getting is categorical. Means it's coming with a lot of strings attached. And that's a challenge for us because as you can see from the budget, we just don't have enough revenue to make up all of these additional mandates that we're going to be charged with. So are there questions on that? I was trying to lay this out as kind of as easiest to read as I possibly could. If it doesn't make sense, I'm happy to try a different approach.
No, I think it, thank you for how you laid it out. I always feel like if I can understand it, anybody can, actually.
I will share the risk conversation, if I may talk about two things, the risk conversation and specifically the categorical aid and within that, special education. So as we continue through the budget development process, going back to the original conversation of how we opened tonight, to make the levels of reductions that we are proposing is going to be a significant impact on our district. And I am growing more concerned with our ability without additional revenue that the impact of the reduction, the cost of that reduction, the lasting cost of that reduction, what does that feel like? How do we quantify that and remain a viable district for our students, an attractive district for people to want to stay and come to work in an already challenging staffing market? So this risk conversation for me is something that, you know, what I hear from our staff a lot going out to our schools is, Michael, we're sitting at 14% of our fund balance. You know, why are we not having some conversation around that's what these are used for when we're in really tough situations of a lot of things out of our control. And so again, I want to bring this forward to the board about, you know, what I continually hear as I go out to our school staffs. And I can appreciate the push, and I thank our staff for speaking their truths and their concerns around how they see it from their vantage point and from where we sit and how we see things to really bring balance to impact as well as stewardship. So that's something I want to just keep on the front burner with you all. And the second thing that I hear a lot about, and I think this is just a good example with MSBA's visualization, and I believe we might have linked this. I can't recall if we linked this in one of my Fridays 5, but if not, it'll be coming up in this Fridays 5 as we continue to do our budget trips. You can see a significant portion of this past legislative session came by way of categorical aid. And I will echo Tammy that yes, we are very appreciative of the resources that we did receive, much of which comes in categories that don't give us the flexibility of general fund. So when we start talking about deficits, folks, we're talking about deficits in the general fund. We're not talking about deficits in categorical aid. And so I hear from a lot of our staff, and I'm sure our community, Well, you've got all this money sitting over here in categorical aid. Why can't you just use that to, manage the class sizes differently? Or why can't you just use that to get a different calendar or a different master schedule at the high school? And we just simply can't take what's earmarked in one category to spend it outside of that category. But one big one that comes up a lot is special ed funding. And one of our greatest concerns right now is the amount of students coming to us through the referral process for special education currently, as Tammy just noted a little bit ago. And through our referral process, we have about a 90% identification rate. So many of these students will be identified. And we're going to support them. We're going to service them. And legally, we have to. This is not an option. So the question that comes, and rightfully so, is, well, Michael, what about all that special ed cross-subsidy aid that we just got in this past session? And that money has been spent on this current special education referral load that we're currently supporting right now, and some of what we're forecasting. So that $3 million that we received, and this is a conversation that I vividly remember at 2 of our campuses having, that money has been spent. Because I think the ask was, well, why can't we just use that to mitigate the cross-subsidy from our general fund that we're using? Now we have $3 million at our disposal in Fund 1. Theoretically, yep, that makes sense. But what isn't known is this very fact right here. We are going to be underwater with special education next year by the tune of about $1 million. That wasn't as part of our forecast. That's now coming with new referrals as well as graduating kids from one grade level to the next. So that's a concern. That's a concern. And again, we're going to serve our students. So I want to be very clear with our families who are going through the referral process right now. Do not fear. We are going to support your students. But we have to be mindful, what does that now do to our bottom line? And we're reaching points of risks where reducing is not going to, it's going to be more costly for us in the long run, versus looking at some other possibilities of augmenting the realities, our financial realities right now. So I wanted to just share those two caveats around that categorical piece and the risk. Turn it over for additional questions and dialogue.
I have a quick question. So in the current deficit projection for the cross-subsidy, in the actual blue area, we're predicting a $3.177 million. The risk is an additional million on that?
Correct.
Just to be clear. Okay.
I have a question about the professional development. So for the 1.4 million that you have projected expenses for professional development, and the revenue is 1.3 million, does all that 1.4 million include the READ Act professional development that is going to be required under the READ Act? Is that
No,
included
so
in
what
there?
this, well, it could. I guess that's a yes, no kind of question. So the way that the statute reads is that school districts are required to set aside 2% of their expenses for professional development. How you spend that is up to you. If you do the calculation, what we are required to spend is $1.3 million. That's the revenue, because that's 2%. We are projecting that we're going to spend $1.4 million. That's what's going to be in Director Edwards' budget. So how he makes that work, if we have to do training for a READ Act, it's going to take up most of that.
So that, yeah, that's what I'm trying to ask is that why are we over budgeting our professional development by $136,000 when we're cutting sections and all these other things?
If I can add to that a little bit, the READ Act is not the only statutory requirement we have for professional development. So while to Tammy's, Director Frederickson's point, there's not statutory requirements attached to the funding source of professional development. There's other statutes that require us to provide certain professional development. So whether that's professional development for our paraeducators, for our special education staff, for the READ Act, whatever that is, there are multiple mandatory requirements on our list that we have to fulfill. That goes into the overall projections of the expenditures. So we statutorily have to set aside revenue of 2%, and how we use that isn't defined in that portion of the statute, but other statutes dictate the level of professional development we have to give depending on different positions and different categories.
And that budget is used to do all of that, including funding certain positions that are eligible to be utilized for that purpose. We definitely have other expenses that are part of, for example, we implemented this year our math curriculum at the elementary level. And the investment of professional development resources, both to pay for the training as well as to pay for our teachers to participate in the training, are examples of costs that are incurred. And those are continued costs that we will have in other content areas as we move forward, in addition to the READ Act. And we'll be providing some additional information around the challenges that we are currently working through to meet the current legislative requirements for the READ Act. That's going to be coming to you as a board here later this spring.
So also with the READ Act, is there any way to implement professional development this year versus, I know there's a professional development that's coming up on April 10th that I've heard some concerns about based on the professional development from the same company that was done previously. I cannot think of the top of my mind what the name of that professional development company was. And if you, I know you know it, so I'm like, you can help me out, but would you be able to shift? World Savvy, yeah. Yeah, so would you be able to shift the World Savvy professional development into some READ Act or Bridges training or some of the training? Or is that World Savvy? I'm just, bringing some concerns that I've heard from staff about the World Savvy professional development, and is there a way to shift it, or do we have to be doing this World Savvy professional development?
So the World Savvy isn't, I wouldn't code that as professional development. That's actually a technical support as we're developing our learner profile and the attributes of our graduates and everyone within the district. So they're facilitating that process. That's also being paid for through integration aid grant, so it's not even coming off of general fund. So that doesn't affect our bottom line, if you will, in terms of like overall deficit. Using some of those funds for work that we're obligated to do, that's where you actually get into the supplanting versus supplementing. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't necessarily just take that money and now pay for READ Act, because that's expected that we cover through our general fund. So then we would get in trouble with MDE because now you're supplanting. So we can't, is the short answer. Now, are there other ways that we could massage that budget to help supplement Fund 1 and to not run risk of supplanting? There's some ability to doing that, but not to your purest question of stop that, add this, or whatever. I know you're not saying it exactly, but like move this from here.
Yeah, because I do know there's other districts that are implementing the READ Act training this year. And so, hearing the feedback on the World Savvy, but you're saying World Savvy is paid for by a grant.
It's not paid for.
Versus paid for out of professional development fees.
Correct. And I would, and then READ Act, I will share, and every district's a little bit different. based upon, obviously, their budgets and where they're at in their whole queue and what's available, what days that they have for PD, et cetera. So without knowing all the nuances of their realities, I wouldn't begin to guess how they're doing it and could we do it, et cetera. What I will say is our team that's in the current pilot with the core READ curriculum that we're looking to adopt. The training specifically, they won't finish that training to provide feedback to say, yep, this is worth it, or here are some of the things that you still need to work out if we're gonna bring this out to our staff. They won't finish that until May. So
Which grades are piloting READ?
We have a small team of LAI representatives, some teacher leaders, and TOSA's members of our LAI team who are participating. It's a small group that are participating to essentially give us a read on, is this the training? Because
Is this the curriculum?
This is
training.
a specific training that of the READ Act, there are 3 trainings. And we're going a little far into this.
That's right.
But there are 3 trainings, and the one we have letters training, which is the largest number of hours that we have had some staff in our district already receive training. There is a second one that is fewer hours, and the one that we are looking at right now is the fewest number of hours of training, but that is 57 hours of training.
Right.
So we are looking at whether or not that will meet our needs because of the level of time that we would have to do that in the upcoming year's calendar to meet the requirements that are currently in legislation around having our K-3 teachers and other areas trained.
But that's in place of the foundations. Is that what you're
No,
saying, or
no,
no?
is a
Or are you,
totally separate.
or are you talking this is content versus?
No,
This is a training.
Yeah.
This is a training that is required, and we are required to choose one of 3 training options. And we are
Regardless of the curriculum that we have in place?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
This is literacy training
This is
versus
the first
curriculum
step
training.
of science
Okay,
of reading
okay, I
training.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we would intend to bring some additional information to you as a board. We are targeting May to give you some additional updates around that.
Okay, and then I have one last question, sorry. For the QComp, we overspend that by almost $400,000. I know that's very specific, but why would we overspend that if
The majority of that goes to stipends, and we have to pay the stipends.
Part of our QComp plan.
Again, the QComp dollar, it's a formula, so we get what we get based on the formula, and then based on our QComp plan, we have stipends and other things that we have to obligated to pay.
So you can see how some of these things go when you hear this notion about unfunded or underfunded mandates. Here are these examples where you're gonna get underfunded. READ is yet another one that even the person carrying the bill is suggesting it's $100 million less than what is required for the state. I think our superintendent's crunched it to be about 200 million, but nonetheless, and currently going in asking for 40 million more, right? So we're gonna still, even if we get it, we're gonna be underfunded by 60 million. So this is, when you look at our legislative platform this year as a board, as a district, and we talked about no more underfunded or unfunded mandates, this is the case in point. So when we get a per pupil formula assigned to this, yet the real cost of QComp is higher, we don't get the full funding for it. That's gotta come somewhere. So that's the challenge, that the legislature doesn't understand boots on the ground, that, yeah, in theory, political theory, sounds great. And again, their hearts are genuine, they're trying to do good, so I wanna be very clear about that. But this is where many districts, and why, you know, you see on the AMSD, well, that's MSD, but the AMSD, why we're having so many districts making some deep cuts. Because we can't continue this kind of platform. with this categorical aid. So I don't mean to digress anymore, but I think I'll turn it back over for
I
comments.
have one last question, sorry.
Yeah.
And so this budget, the projected expenses and revenue is based on 8,682 students, is that correct?
I think it was 669, whatever I said. Almost 8,700 kids.
8,682. So that's the number that this is based on. So if it goes up or down, that budget is going to flex as well.
And again, so whether we can withstand this level of reduction is yet to be seen. So we'll definitely keep you posted as we monitor some of these other factors, and we'll massage things where we can. So, and now I don't want to be just 100% doom and gloom, because there are some bright spots too. I mean, and they might not be hitting to the $1 million categories, but certainly there are some things. So for example, we're getting a lot of feedback around Schoology. And let's be honest, when you're making reductions, you're gonna get feedback on a lot of things. Because everybody's about, yep, we're good, but not that, right? So everybody will have the thing that they really appreciate. And so I understand that. But there's a lot of conversations that we are having with our staff and just internally here around Schoology. And I think there's an opportunity for us based upon internal IT contracts coming back less than what the inflationary projection was built to be, that we may be able to hold off on that reduction so that we have a better transition to something different versus this kind of seemingly pull the rug out from underneath some of our staff, particularly at the secondary level, to go to a platform that doesn't have the functionality and operability commensurate with Schoology, okay? And particularly those who created a lot of content in Schoology, it's not transferable necessarily to Google Classroom. So those are conversations that we're having, and through internal cost-saving measures with contract negotiations. So thank you, Marcus and his team, for demanding folks sharpen their pencils, if I may quote him. We are getting some contracts coming back in at a much more competitive rate. So we're able to leverage some of that to maybe not make that reduction, or make it but not this spring. We can maybe make it, next year and have a transition plan. And we're, Jim, Tammy, and I, we've also been having conversations with some of our external contractors. As you saw in one of the sheets earlier, many of our contractors are subject to the same legislation we are. So the earn safe and sick time clause or the summer unemployment clause. Well, you all understand consumerism 101. Those costs are going to get passed on to the consumer. And so our contract costs are going up as a result of some of these legislative components, in addition to what we're also going to experience, because we don't have the luxury of corporate to pass that on to our taxpayer and say, no, we're not going to pay it, you pay it, right? So we have to pay double on some of these legislative components. But we've also been encouraged with some of the conversations that we've been in with some of our contractors, coming in at some reasonable expectations that we think we could actually put forth in the budget versus something that is just so astronomical. So again, I'm very appreciative of our staff pushing for better numbers and competitive rates when we're facing these kind of situations. And I think our contractors and our partners, many of these are local folks. So and we want to make sure that they have a business to run. We get it, but we also have some fixed revenues.
Next topic is the staffing update.
Steve, you saw?
Oh, sure.
I think we covered that.
Yeah, that was on this other sheet, or on the other topic earlier.
Okay, okay, I thought we were gonna go over. So let's go on to proclamations, and we have 4 proclamations and 5 board members. So what I'm gonna ask is that we start going around here with you, Director Bullion, and if you could read the first proclamation, which is the National Assistant Principals Appreciation Week.
Proclamation, Assistant Principal and Dean Appreciation Week, April 1st through 5th, 2024. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes April 1st through 5th, 2024 as Assistant Principal and Dean Appreciation Week. Our assistant principals and deans provide essential support to our more than 8,700 PLSAS students and more than 1,400 employees. This week, we celebrate our thanks and gratitude for these essential leaders. Whereas Prior Lake Savage Area Schools employs 6 assistant principals and 7 deans. Whereas assistant principals and deans are vital members of their respective buildings and the broader district leadership teams, instructional leaders to students and staff, culture and community builders, facility managers, special program managers, and are entrusted with the education and development of young people. Whereas assistant principals and deans provide students with opportunities and guidance to ensure their success and development as positive contributors to our schools and broader community. Whereas assistant principals and deans inspire a passion for learning. Whereas assistant principals and deans work with all stakeholders to foster a sense of community and pride within our schools and district. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to assist principals and deans for supporting the education of our students and proclaims April 1st through 5th, 2024 to be Assistant Principals and Deans Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
If I may, first of all, clarify the number, and it's a mistake I wish I would not have made in submission of this, because I left off our deans at the secondary level inadvertently. So that number of deans includes 4, 2 at the middle school and 2 at the high school, on top of the 7 deans that support each of our elementaries. So my
11 deans total.
Yes, my sincere apologies for that. These folks, as the proclamation states, are vital to maintaining the learning environment in our schools and supporting the work of our leadership team, our principals specifically. And I think if our principals had been invited to speak, particularly at the elementary level, I think, but it would certainly be at the secondary level as well, where the deans have been in place for a longer period of time. That addition this past year to have full-time deans at each of our schools at the elementary level, and to have a full-time dean at each of our middle schools has been extremely appreciated by our leadership teams at the site and recognized for what they do to help the day-to-day operations of the school flow smoothly. And specific to the assistant principals, I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the building of the master schedule at the secondary level, one of the primary tasks that they are involved in, but the day-to-day maintaining of the school and making sure that they are there to meet, greet, and support our students on a daily basis is extremely important. So we want to acknowledge their work that they do each and every day.
Thank you. And Director Burnick, will you read the Media Specialist Appreciation Week?
Certainly. Media Specialist Appreciation Week, April 1st through 5th, 2024. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes April 1 through 5, 2024 as Media Specialist Appreciation Week. Our media specialists provide media support and guidance for more than 8,600 students, preparing them for success in a globally competitive world. This week we celebrate our thanks and gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas April 4th is celebrated annually as National School Librarian Day, Whereas media specialists provide guidance to students through print media, literature, digital resources, and technology. Whereas media specialists provide professional development and support to teachers and other school and district staff. Whereas media specialists set students up for success in their future education and careers by teaching them how to search for and research information. Whereas media specialists support students in their use of technology to help create equitable access for all students and to empower and enhance the teaching and learning experience. Whereas media specialists are a wealth of knowledge and information who come up with creative ways to teach and connect with students. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage Area School media specialists for supporting the education of our students and staff, and declares April 1st through 5th, 2024 to be Media Specialist Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
Yes, and thank you for that declaration and appreciation. Once again, a group of staff who provide a different level of support than a classroom teacher does, but albeit equally as important, and the relationships, as we've talked about here at this table, with regard to the specialists at the elementary level specifically, and the importance of having those relationships with staff and students, and being there, again, another resource to help support our students in their journey as learners. These folks play a particularly important role. We all know the importance of research, as is noted here, in technology, and these folks in these staff positions have been at the forefront of helping our students navigate the digital world as they are part of, and helping them to find resources, vet resources, and meet the needs of a diverse set of students that come into our schools each and every day.
Thank you. And Director Atkinson, could you read the Equity Services Staff Appreciation Week?
I'm going to ask if Jess, you serve on the equity committee, do you want to read this one and I'll take the next one?
Sure.
Okay.
Is that all right with you,
Is it
Director
appropriate?
Arians? Okay. Equity Services Staff Appreciation Week, April 8th through 12th, 2024. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes April 8th through 12th, 2024 as Equity Services Staff Appreciation Week. Our Equity Services staff support the development of learning environments to ensure high achievement for each and every student. This week, we celebrate our thanks and gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas the month of April is Celebrate Diversity Month, a time to recognize, honor, and celebrate the diversity surrounding us. Whereas the Equity and Inclusion Department staff consists of a Director of Equity and Inclusion, Administrative Assistant, American Indian Ed Coordinator, Spanish-speaking and East African liaisons, and teachers in the English Learner Department. Whereas members of the Equity Services staff have developed an achievement and integration plan to address the achievement gap by developing cultural awareness in our staff and students, providing equitable academic opportunities and support, and increasing student and family engagement. Whereas members of the Equity Services staff support staff and students to overcome barriers to closing the achievement and opportunity gaps that many students face through providing professional development and connecting to community resources. Whereas the Equity and Inclusion Department provides resources to staff to close the language barrier and increase the understanding of the refugee and immigrant experiences through collaboration with various refugee resettlement agencies and providing interpreting support. Whereas members of the Equity Services staff works collaboratively with teachers and principals to support marginalized students focused on building inclusive and safe classrooms where every student feels a sense of belonging, they feel seen, safe, and secure, allowing them to reach their full potential. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage Area Schools Equity Services staff for supporting the equitable education of our students, and declares April 8th through 12th, 2024 to be Equity Services Staff Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
Thank you, Director Olstead, and on behalf of Sam Oak, who is currently in Cambodia as a partnership with some of the work that he leads here in International Rotary, we have a group of our teachers who are out there right now. So I'll be speaking on his behalf. And just want to say a huge thank you to all of our staff that work in our equity and inclusion department, as noted here in the proclamation. And Director Olsted as one of our directors that serves on that committee. It's really important that we recognize the breadth of who we are as a community in servicing all of our students and all of our families to ensure that they have access to everything that they need to be successful. And that's really the simplest form of equity, to ensure that. And so, you know, whether you're new to our country or you have various challenges that you need to work through, we have an opportunity here within our district to ensure that we'll meet your needs and guarantee you that opportunity to get everything that you need in our district to chase your dreams. And, you know, the work with our APAC or the work with our EL department, you know, we know that we have students who have a variety of supports that are necessary, and understands leadership in that with many of his staff. I just want to send a huge thank you to them for all the work that they do.
And Director Atkinson, the proclamation for National Occupational Therapist Month.
Sure, thank you. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes April 2024 as National Occupational Therapist Month. This month, we celebrate the occupational therapy profession and the contributions therapists make in the school setting. Whereas the school board recognizes the invaluable contributions of occupational therapists to our educational system and the well-being of our students. And whereas occupational therapists play a vital role in fostering student success by addressing physical, cognitive, sensory, and emotional challenges that may hinder school progress. And whereas occupational therapists collaborate with educators, parents, and other professionals to create individualized interventions and support plans that promote students' independence and participation in school activities. And whereas occupational therapists employ innovative strategies, inclusive and evidence-based practices to facilitate students' engagement in learning, socialization, and daily routines within the school environment. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage Area Schools occupational therapists for their work supporting students, and proclaims April 2024 to be National Occupational Therapist Month in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
Thank you, Farida. Thank you, Board. Again, I'm back to celebrate my crew. We have 5 occupational therapists that touch about 290 students within our district. So just 5 of them make a huge difference in the lives of about 290 of our kids. And that's birth through grade 12. So just want to give out a shout out to them. They have their hands in everything, whether it's academics, sensory, social, physical. I mean, they really do so many different things and partner with all the other experts, whether it's speech or teachers or PT, physical therapy. They're there to help all of our students find success. So thank you for recognizing them. I'm very proud of all of them, and I'm glad that the board takes the time to recognize these groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is, I believe, our bus contract.
No.
I'm sorry, let me get down there. Policy, first reading of policy. We don't have any policies, do we? No. Okay. All right, let me get back here. Okay, then the strategic plan update.
Yeah, just.
Sorry, I thought we were.
That's all right. So just real quickly here for the board, we had last week or 2 weeks ago, we had our second core planning team session, which was a very robust discussion on the initial pass of looking at the raw data files that were generated from our first round of community questions around our 4 dominant questions, and beginning to make meaning of that data, as well as generating themes that were jumping out or emerging from that data. So that's what our core planning team did, pretty robust conversations. Then on Saturday, we started our second round of engagement with our community, and in a similar fashion, they too had the raw data that we kind of aggregated up into documents under each question. And as groups, our community was looking at what they shared and soliciting themes that were emerging as small groups, and then they would share that out with everyone as well. I will tell you that we had 60 people in attendance on Saturday, so a really packed house, and thank you, Director Atkinson, for stepping in and helping facilitate. We were short some facilitators, so we actually planned for about 40, which was the high average of our last sessions. So we had more that showed up this time around. So very robust conversations, and we have additional conversations taking place yet this week, and then our final one, I think, on April 9th at the high school of our public ones. And then we've also done some of our family groups that Sam has as well. In the past, we've been a guest as part of their agenda. We've also done our special ed advisory group as well, and our TNL group. So we've tried to hit a couple of our committees to ensure that we're trying to get as much representation and feedback outside of the general kind of open casting call, if you will. So thank you to our community for showing up. Really great turnout and really good discussion.
I have a couple questions. In order to honor our district's commitment to transparency, my understanding is because the core planning meetings were going to be closed to the public, that we would be updating our website with information about these core planning meetings, as well as that information would be coming to the board so that all board members have the same information. And I don't believe I've seen an update to the website.
We haven't updated that yet, yeah.
Okay, and when will that be updated?
After tonight, we'll have the documents that we had at our core planning team. We'll upload those onto the website, and then will have those as well. And then our key takeaways will be posted up there on the website as well.
And then the other thing is that it was brought to my attention, especially on Saturday, we did have a very robust group, right, at that meeting. When we started this process, we had community members sign in. Everybody received a name badge, and then we had the opportunity to introduce ourselves, or the community, had the opportunity to introduce ourselves. We did not do that on Saturday. And one of the concerns is, how do we, as a district, ensure that people understand that the people that are showing up at these community meetings are taxpayers in our district versus people coming in from a different district with a voice that may have an influence on our strategic plan.
So we do have our sign-in, that still happened. We did not do name tags, you're right, didn't do name tags this time around. And then some of the groups did introductions, small introductions at their individual groups. And so I trust that our community who's coming out to these sessions are folks who are from our community. And, I had a community member email me over the weekend expressing a similar question about that. And I will just tell you, just initially looking through the data on that sign-in sheet, and I didn't get through all of it, 72% of the people who are on that sheet, we verified are folks that are in our community. And we'll continue to do that. But I trust our community that the folks who live here will be here as part of these conversations. But we'll continue to have our sign-in, and people put their name, they put their role in our community. And that's what we've done from day one. And so that continued to happen on Saturday as well. So
Just talking to some other districts about how they ran this process and whatever, I think it might be helpful during your board operating, or during your operating norms, when you talk about these are the norms, to state that this session is for resident community members, and that if you are not a resident, then you're welcome to sit the meetings open to the public and observe. Because I think people know, do they live in our district or do they not live in our district? You know what I mean? And if they take the time to come to the meeting, I think it's out of due respect for those who showed up at our meeting, I think it would be valuable for us to know who they are. Meaning, like, asking them to make an introduction is a way for us to get to know them. So, and it just makes it a little bit more of a personal experience versus just jumping right into the process. And
Yeah,
it
so-
creates a little bit more of a personal
Sure.
experience.
Yeah, and I will say that that has been our format. I will also share, we were not planning to have 60 people in attendance that day, so we had to do a lot of modification and time to get through all the content. And we actually even went over still. So yes, I did truncate that general setup on the front side and didn't do the time of large group introductions for everybody. That was just taking way too much time given the amount of people that were there. But that has been our protocol in the past, where people have done a quick introduction of who they are because we've had a manageable amount of people. Now moving forward, if that is the trend that we have that many people showing up, we'll do those small intros in those smaller groups, but we're not gonna take the time to have 60 people, take the time to say, I'm so-and-so, and I'm so-and-so, and I'm so-and-so, within a 2-hour time frame. We just wouldn't be able to do it, but we can do it in those smaller groups so that people understand who's in those small groups where they're gonna be spending an hour's worth of time with one another. And again, we have our sign-in sheets, so we'll continue that as well.
Setting the ground rules that this is for
Sure.
taxpayers, I think
Sure.
is really important, because there was several people there on Saturday that are recognizable within our community that did not live in our district. And so, and I know that was brought to my attention as well as a concern, so.
So
I think
I'd
it's
be
really
curious.
important, and we can take this offline.
I'm
ensuring-
fine with having this online because I think this is an important part about the community. That is asserting they know every single person who lives in this community. I mean, that's kind of the point that's being made. And I'm not gonna say that they're wrong or right, but if I'm gonna err on the fact that somebody knows everybody and say that person doesn't live in our community, I'm open to having that conversation to let me know who that was, so that I can approach that individual and have that conversation. But again, I do err on trusting our community. I think that speaks volumes when we're trying to build community. And I can certainly ensure and preface that this is for, our school district community.
I think that would be
Can say that, but I don't know everybody who lives in this community. I'm gonna say that right now.
No.
And I won't be able to discern whether person A or person B lives or doesn't live. And, I'm not gonna check addresses and IDs of people to verify as well. You're not suggesting, I know that, but I'm just saying, to our community who's listening, that's the balance here, folks, that's the balance.
I think if they know that it's 4 voices within our own school district, and someone is either shows up or is, encouraged to come, then I would think that they would observe rather than participate
Okay.
within the
You need voices. Can I, go ahead.
I just want to, I want to respectfully challenge that. Because number one, I think, what if you're an open enroll family? You may not live in our district, but you are still an open enroll family. And to me, those families have every right to be there.
Yeah, let me give you, as I say, I'll answer that for you. If they open enroll in Burnsville, Egan, Savage, then they should be part of their strategic plan because they pay taxes. I mean, this is all about a taxpayer. It's the taxpayers who are funding
And I
our school
disagree with
district.
that. I disagree with that.
No,
If you are a student in the district.
Yeah, if they have students in our district, they have every right to be
They have
at
every right
this
to be part of our
conversation because
strategic
their
plan
student
process.
is enrolled in our district.
You're a stakeholder. in
You're
our
a
district.
stakeholder in our district. Your student attends our schools. You might live in Burnsville, but you do have the ability to have conversation about what matters in this district because your kid goes here. I wouldn't uninvite an open enrolled family not to participate in conversations about their student experience. I just wouldn't do that.
And I think to take that even further, I mean, I live very close to Lakeville.
Mhm.
So these meetings are open, our meetings are open. Who's to stop me from going to Lakeville's strategic planning committee? No, I don't pay taxes in Lakeville, and I'm not a stakeholder in that district, in that school district. However, I live right by there, and what happens in Lakeville can residually affect me where I live. And so the fact that it's a public meeting, and nor does every Tom, Dick, and Harry need to come to these meetings, like depending on where they live, and I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I'm just saying it's a public meeting, it's an open meeting. And yes, if people want to observe, I think that's great. I think if they feel compelled to share something, and I think that's okay. I was thinking a lot about this today, and I just wanted to kind of get that out there, that our open enroll families are just as much as a stakeholder as anybody else that lives here. And I think neighboring communities, you know,
Yeah, and
have just as much of a,
yeah, and
not as much maybe, but as they're welcome to share their opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. I disagree only because it's our community. We're an independent school district, 719. There are voting boundaries, just like the open enrolled families can't come vote in our district. So my understanding is that this community plan is built by the voters who pay taxes within our district. And that's the way it's always been explained to me from MSBA or any of the other school districts who have done this strategic plan. And I agree, it's an open meeting, anybody can come and observe. But understanding, that's why we have voting boundaries. They can't go vote for, you can't go vote for Lakeville School District school board candidates, just like I can't go vote for Jordan's school board
But
candidates.
you could be a renter, and we have a lot of apartment buildings being built in our community, and we have a lot of students coming into our buildings that are families that are lifelong renters. They don't actually pay taxes. Would we
Yeah,
have to have them
They
prove?
pay taxes through their rent.
You won't say bring your rent
They pay
statement.
taxes, then the owner of the property pays taxes.
You know, can I just, let's just,
So I think we need
I
to just
think
set
we're
some-
good with where we are right now. We only have, what, a couple meetings left? And I think that we can move on from this conversation, if that's okay, with the rest of the meeting.
I have one other question about the core planning meeting. My understanding is that, Chair France, I went back and watched the January 22nd meeting, and you stated this at the 24-minute mark, that board members in the core meeting are there to listen and to observe, and not supposed to be actively involved. And I just wanted to reiterate, you know, is that being honored, basically? Because the executive team has no special powers or should have no special influence on this core plan. This is the board's plan, and so I just wanted to, I wasn't in that core meeting, so I just wanted to ask if that was being honored within the core meeting.
I can't speak for anybody else, nor will I. As far as I know, we're good, and the core meeting decides how it's going to work, and the individual tables, they contribute, and from my perspective, I think we're good.
So board members are actively listening versus actively participating.
I can't speak for anybody
we're-
else, and we're not policing each
We're
other, so it's.
speaking, we wear tags that identify us as board members.
Yeah.
We're at a table with a leader, a facilitator. We are not the facilitators of that table. We're there to listen.
You're there to listen.
We speak when spoken to, and they ask, you know. But no, we don't lead the discussions.
I think it's just honoring that process, is what I'm asking, so.
I think so. I think I would say that is being honored. I know at the last core planning meeting, I asked a clarifying question to Dr. Thomas when he was sharing information. That was appreciated by my table, but again, just I do believe that, you know, we're respecting the process and not guiding or leading at the tables.
Thank you. Okay, next thing on the agenda is superintendent relation, oh, you already did that, informational items. I only have one item to share that's new and one anecdotal item just to remind people. First of all, our next board meeting on April 8th comes on the tail of spring break, and therefore the administration will be out that week, and our finances will not appear in the board book until Saturday, April 6th, just so you know.
Can you repeat that?
So our next board meeting is Monday, April 8th, and that is, and normally we receive the packets the Tuesday before. Because that is spring break and we have staff that is missing, we won't receive the financials until April 6th, Saturday, April 6th, in the board packet. Thank you. And that will be a reminder that'll go out on the agenda, but I just wanted to make sure that, that everyone here understands that, so that there's not a whole bunch of emails going in saying, hey, we're missing stuff.
And will the financials that we received at the table this evening, will those be uploaded to the board book as well? For the
The
community?
sheet.
And just to on that April 1st and 2nd, the district is closed.
Oh, yeah, Monday and
Yeah,
Tuesday,
just, so
the
just if
district
you're
is literally
popping up
closed.
here, it's literally the whole district is shut down.
Next on the, oh, well, one other thing, the invite was sent out for the May 10th date, which is what seemed to be the most popular date that everyone could make it to for our next board retreat, when you guys voted on the dates. So that should be in your inbox if you haven't already accepted it.
I have a question. Since that never came to the board for full discussion and or approval, what is the cost of that board retreat?
Braver Angels, we make a donation, but Braver Angels technically is a nonprofit. They do not charge us.
Just the cost of admin's time and whatever other materials
Just
there.
like last time, yep. We're not going to be providing any materials for this. This is going to be all the Braver Angels workshop.
Okay, and just given the fact that the majority of our board members have already taken that training, I'm just surprised that who authorized putting that on the agenda?
I think we've already discussed that at several study sessions, and that was an executive team meeting, and then we decided on the agenda, and then we passed by the dates and sent out the agenda items to the rest of the board, and we received no feedback on it, other than what was mentioned here at the study session, which nobody did a thumbs up to challenge it.
Well, I've sent many emails in challenging the fact that the executive team is making decisions on board professional development when it says per policy that that is a full board decision. And so I'm very challenged with the fact that our executive team has taken upon themselves to determine what is necessary for board professional development when, like I said, I don't plan on attending it. I know that half the board has already attended the Braver Angels training. You just attended it in the core planning meeting. And so I just, like I said, I don't agree with it and I have no intention of attending it.
That's fine, and please don't make assumptions for me, because all I did was get the introductory thing. I never went through one of their workshops. So I'll take your comments under advisement, and then I'm going to ask next for future agenda topics. Does anybody have any future agenda topics?
I didn't know if we wanted to do, if anybody was interested in doing a deeper dive into READ Act further down. You know, I know we're talking about it, teaching and learning, and I know we're also having a special a study session on like full curriculum and kind of like a deep dive into those things. So maybe that's part of that, but I thought maybe we could stand to benefit from a deeper dive into the READ Act, maybe after teaching and learning is kind of talked about it too, and I know it's kind of a fluid thing right now, but, and if not, that's totally fine, just something I thought of that.
For a study session?
For a study session, yes.
Well, I would, yeah, is this the will of the board? Do you guys want to deep dive on the redact at a future study session. And I would defer to Dr. Edwards on when, because I think some information is still outstanding, I'm not sure.
For
but-
sure.
Yeah, I think it would either be the, if we want to do a study session, April would be appropriate potentially. What's
Is that
the date
too
of
soon, you
April?
think?
Well, there are there's some more legislation being passed on the REACT, so it might be
That's why.
beneficial to wait until the legislation is
It's
firmed
being
up.
That's
considered,
why I
yeah.
was.
Yeah,
There's a lot
so-
under
mentioning
consideration.
Yeah.
It's being considered at this
Additional
time.
funding, additional requirements.
I thought
So,
maybe even summer.
Again, Dr. Edwards, I'm gonna leave it up to you to figure out when the
When
dust
would
is
be
settled.
appropriate? Yep.
Yeah, some things are still.
I like the recommendation to be able to have a deeper conversation once we know what has actually passed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it's speculation right now, and I don't want to share something with the board, i.e. the community, and then they think it's this, and then we come back 2 weeks later and a different vote has occurred. So if the board is okay with that, we'll wait until it passes, then we'll unpack kind of what does that actually mean for us. Okay.
I agree. Thank you.
So, can I ask for a formal thumbs up though, with that?
With those
Okay.
parameters in place.
With those parameters in
And
place to add it,
also-
make sure it's on an agenda item.
And also with the understanding if our curriculum is approved. I don't know when,
Well,
how.
I will, if that happens before the bill passes, we'll let you all know as a board if they approve our curriculum.
Yeah,
But I think a status update following the legislation, because that comes out of MDE, the approval comes out of
Right.
MDE,
Separate from the
separate from the
legislation.
legislation.
okay, thank you.
So, just to be clear.
Sorry.
Yes. I'm in
Do a
agreement.
thumbs up
I'm
to
in
add it
agreement.
onto a future study session when the dust is settled is what I put in.
Legislative.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
so, we're good,
Yeah.
okay.
Cool.
Okay, so any other future agenda topics?
Yeah, I would, I'd like to see an update. We did not receive an update on the middle school FastBridge scores, and I'd like to see that come back to the board for an update. I think we do FastBridge in fall, winter, spring, is that correct?
Yes.
So I don't know where we're at. Do we have the winter ones in yet, or?
Yeah, but when we had we weren't complete with the
The testing.
testing window at that time. Yep,
For middle school.
for middle school.
So would we have winter for all the grades?
Yes.
To go ahead and do an update for FastBridge?
You already have that somewhere on the schedule. I know we're doing an academic deep dive in the fall with all the 2024.
We'll come before then.
Yeah.
This is for
This is
immediately.
This is for this current year. So, yeah, we can look at adding, I think that could actually be April.
Yes, that could be
April.
April.
Do we have spring then?
We do, but we don't.
That won't come until
We
later.
don't have, and actually, we don't have spring at the middle school level due to the level of MCA testing. Because we have 3 tests for 8th grade. I'd have to verify that for 6th and 7th grade, but that would be after MCAs.
So FastBridge would be winter, we would include middle
We
school.
could give an update on middle school data,
Yeah,
yes.
just the middle school. That's what was missing from the
Yep.
original data set because the window had
Hadn't
not closed.
We hadn't completed testing yet.
Okay, so can I have a thumbs up or?
Yes.
Mhm.
And then I have one other thing that has been kind of on top of mind. We talked tonight about the investment in the deans. We've also made an investment into Live More, Screen Less. I think it'd be really beneficial to get an update on behavior numbers and how those investments have impacted behaviors, particularly in the middle school. And have they been, has data shown that making that investment has had an impact on behavior in our schools? Positive impact. And I know there's some other boards that I've talked to, they actually get a report that basically says like, here's last quarter's behavior numbers, this quarter, the next, following, whatever, so.
I'm not sure how to quantify behavior numbers. I'm gonna turn to you guys to.
Yeah, we
Well,
do, they quantify
referrals
it.
and
Yeah, you have to quantify it, 'cause
suspensions
you report
and-
it to
yeah.
MDE.
Mhm.
Mhm.
We report suspensions to MDE at
Fights.
the end of the year.
at the
All
end
the
of the
things.
year.
That's
Yeah,
it.
the DERS is the annual of the year.
Yep.
But there are behavioral metrics that we can tease out for sure. Again, we could figure out how to do a quarterly of some sort on that, if that's what the board wants.
And I could get a copy of the other district that has the reports. I mean, it's in their board book, so I could pull that for you as well.
I'm wondering when we could fit that in, even if the board approved it, given the amount of teasing that out. If we cover April and May is gonna be really heavy budget and June is budget and levy.
I think it'd be a quick update. It's just a simple report, so the report is already put together,
We
you
can,
know.
Just, yeah, do you wanna just get back to someone?
yeah, we can.
Okay. Do people want a report on behavior? Sure.
It's concise information.
Okay, we only have 4, so I don't care one way or the other. So, okay, okay, okay. All right. And with that, we're going to adjourn the study session for the board meeting. We're going to stay here for the board meeting. Is that okay, everybody?
Yeah, that's fine.
To make it easier from the, do you want to take a quick recess and please?
I'll run.
Yeah, please.